Hello and welcome to episode 14 of the Smart Home Collective today. Delighted to be joined by Adam Alport from Local Bytes. Adam, how are you doing?
Hello there, Lee. Thanks for having me on the podcast. It's great to be here.
Good. So I reached out to Adam a number of months ago. Saw a post Adam put up to say, by the way, Local Bytes is going to be full time for me. And I thought, you know what, it'd be a really good opportunity to get Adam on, learn a little bit more about Local Bytes, understand the background, where it came from, what his background is, and how he's managed to turn what I think was a little smart home hustle into a full-time job.
Call it that.
So Adam, over to you. Give us a quick kind of introduction. What is Local Bytes for those people that haven't used it before? Website.
For those who haven't heard of us, I always say us. It's still just me, which feels ridiculous. But Local Bytes is a smart home company that I set up a couple of years ago with the aim to make locally controlling your smart home a lot easier. So essentially everything we do at the moment is built on top of open source technologies and sort of open standards. It's an extension of what I love to do, which is probably the easiest way to describe it. I got annoyed with how the ecosystem was, and I thought, you know what, I can do something about this. So here we are, 2 years on. And
when you say ecosystem, so I'm going to get a load of question here because I know what the answer is. But you're talking about the cloud world of smart homes dependent on cloud. Absolutely.
I've always been somewhat privacy conscious. Maybe not as much as I should be some days, but I'm big on sort of data ownership, and it shows in my personal life. Right, I don't like deleting things. I still have essentially every piece of homework I've done throughout school. Every assignment that has been typed up, I have copies of.
Okay. You're a hoarder.
Pretty much. Somehow it all fits into less than a terabyte of like actual data, which is crazy. Essentially every photo I've taken, I have a copy of. Not quite in its raw quality, because I started backing up my photos on my iPod Touch. Got an iPod Touch for Christmas when I was younger. And I used, as it was called at the time, Picasa WebSync, which of course now is Google Photos. But yeah, I have essentially every photo I've taken, every video I've recorded that isn't the inside of my pocket. I don't like to get rid of stuff, and I think a big part of that is sort of data portability, so to speak. You know, all of those assignments started off as being Word documents on a USB stick. And then it became a backup of that USB stick. And over time, sure, the way I keep data has evolved, but the sort of core concept that I try and follow hasn't changed at all. Like, I think if we as consumers make a thing, own a thing, buy a thing, there shouldn't be someone else, out there trying to tell us what we can and can't do with it. I didn't have Microsoft watching over going, no, that's not a nice thing to write in a document. We don't allow that. So I just carry that forward into the smart home. I started off flashing my own smart plugs. I used to buy 4-packs on Amazon.
And just what standard 2-year based smart plugs, or were they a certain brand?
Yeah, they were just white labeled 2-year stuff. And then I used the good old 2-year convert to move them over to Tasmota, and that's how I got into this. So yeah, that's the company in a nutshell. But I'm sure we'll do a bit more of a deep dive in a bit.
Yeah, so yeah, so it's unusual for somebody to say, "Listen, one day I'm going to start a smart home company." Boom. So there's I know there's some kind of technical knowledge that we need to get you there. So what is your background?
I am. I'm actually a software developer.
Okay.
So I've always been interested in computers. My dad worked in IT. My mother does not. She is technophobic almost, but my dad worked in IT and he ran his own business. So I was sort of surrounded by technology in some
Yeah.
form, um, and that's but maybe him working in data recovery is what got me into sort of data sovereignty, so to speak. Um, but I at a reasonably young age, crikey, this is a throwback. I don't know if you've seen the YouTube channel Tinkernut.
Tinkernut? No.
Oh, he's been going for 14 years, I think.
Okay.
Like ancient now. Used to upload a lot more, and it always used to be quirky things like um, shutting down your computer via text message.
Okay.
I don't know why that used to speak to me, but those sort of quirky things. He'd do things like to 10 novel uses for Dropbox. Crikey, when
Okay.
Dropbox was all the rage
I was
before.
going to say, yeah, drop was a big thing. Yeah.
Yeah, that was before Microsoft released SkyDrive, if I'm not mistaken. Before
Yeah,
they
it
had to
was. You're right.
rebrand.
And you're right. You're right. Even calling it SkyDrive for a start before they could take him to court all like that.
Yeah, but yeah, so I was really into technology and sort of making things essentially. So
Okay.
from there, I started watching videos on how to build a website, as every sort of 10-year-old does in their spare time. Um, and it went from there, sort of snowballed. So in 2018, I finished secondary school, as most 18-year-olds do, and I went to college doing IT. Didn't do great. Found out that I really wasn't great at paperwork. I'm awful at paperwork. I don't like writing about how I did things,
Yeah.
which maybe I should have paid more attention at. But hey ho. Um, so, but going to college got me contacts. It got me into the workplace. So I started working for. They're actually an events company, but they had a digital side of the business. So I was working on reward programs for pretty big companies. So we were working with people like Royal Caribbean Cruises and Camelot Lotteries.
Yeah.
Um, and that's where I really honed in my craft. God, that sounds so pretentious when I say it like that.
Your
Uh,
craft.
yeah, it's a vocation. I shouldn't do the accent, but yeah, that's how I really realized that was what I enjoyed
That
doing.
was your calling.
Yeah, so to speak. Um, so it just went from there really.
Okay.
Did a year there as essentially an internship, and then moved on. Did some freelancing. Started a company with a mate who was also freelancing, um, doing digital development. We were a PHP shop, which PHP has a reputation now, and I would like to publicly dispel that reputation. PHP is fantastic. Um, I joke, but I always find myself going back to PHP. I love it. I really do. Um, so yeah, we were a PHP
Okay.
sort of company. We did a lot of um, data work. So I'm trying to pull up quick examples that I'm allowed to talk about. Yeah, I rewrote payment stacks, that sort of thing. I was doing a lot of data manipulation. Um, that's where my heart is.
Okay.
Uh, and yeah, it was really fun. Really fun. We were really good at what we did.
Okay.
We were relatively fast at doing it. I mean, we didn't rush it, but we designed and developed. solid pieces of software.
Yep.
But we're awful at business.
Yeah.
And a lot of days I still think I am. But we did not run the business well. We weren't businessmen.
Okay.
And
So all the entrepreneurial in terms of we've got a skill set, let's just dive in and do something. But actually, the other side of entrepreneurship is having that very that as you said, business mindset to be able to
yeah.
structure business model, etc., etc.
Yeah, because ultimately when you're running a business, it's no longer just what you're doing, right?
Yeah.
It's what you want as an individual, and then it's what the business needs.
Yeah.
So separating that can be quite difficult, and when it can be really difficult when you're excited about what you're doing, which we absolutely love that. So we ultimately closed down the company.
Okay.
We walked away with essentially 2 years of our salary each.
Yep.
So I took a 6 months break. I
Yep.
was burnt out. We were working most days. We were working long hours. There were a few times I slept at the office because I'd be working late and just think, what is even the point of going home now?
Yeah. And at this point, had the smart home world, was it in
So
your view, or was it completely not a thing?
I've been interested in smart home in some capacity for a while. So I think I sent you a link to that tweet from years ago. I can't find it, but oh, I know where it will be. Wasn't there? So that picture from years ago where I've hooked a kettle up to a Raspberry Pi.
Yeah.
I know we sort of spoke about that the other week. So yeah, at that point I was interested in smart home. I didn't have the knowledge to convince my mother what we were doing is safe. And I think that's where I truly learned the importance of, dare I say, spousal approval factor, or in my case, parental approval factor. But then, yeah, it was about that time. There was a Prime Day sale, and we picked up some Philips Hue lights. Now, Paulus has said many times Philips Hue is the gateway drug for Home Assistant.
Yep.
And sure enough, it was.
Yeah.
So that was the first time I could integrate something physical that my mum felt was useful.
Okay.
Because that's the big thing that a lot of people struggle with, right? And I mean, business people will call it the value proposition, right? How does this actually help what I do day to day?
Yeah.
And in this case, I think one of my very first automations that my mum sort of started thinking, you know what, this is all right. We used to watch a fair amount of Netflix via the Chromecasts, and of course, Chromecast will integrate with Home Assistant. So I set up an automation so whenever the sun had gone down and we pause the TV, the light will come on. Simple. Because half the time, if we're pausing the TV, it's because we need to go to the toilet or we want to make a drink.
Yeah.
Or it's the end of the film.
Yep.
So I think it was any time it was not playing. So pause, stop, turn off, whatever.
Yep.
And then a week or two later, I slightly improved it. So if you then resume playback within 5 minutes, it would turn the light off.
Oh, okay.
And that is the one automation.
And this is all done through Home Assistant at the time?
All done through Home Assistant.
Okay.
Home Assistant, Philips Hue.
So was your entry literally Hue straight into Home Assistant?
Pardon?
Was your entry literally Philips Hue and then straight to Home Assistant?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. I had a bit of tinkering before that, so but ultimately it wasn't doing anything. I didn't
Yep.
really have anything to
Yep.
actuate, or didn't have any plugs going. So
And
then
what,
it sort of went from there.
okay, and what made you get this? I always think it's a fascinating question. What made you go into Home Assistant? So there's always somebody always has a reason as to what was why go down that crack route, that cocaine route of I'm going to get into the Home Assistant world. Because at the time you don't realise what a slippery slope it is, and you think, oh, I'm just going to do
Yeah.
it anything. Personally, when I started, it was just a couple of Hue bulbs, a couple of Alexas, and I was happy. They go on and off depending on
Yeah.
the time of day, and then all of a sudden you start to look into it a little bit more, and yeah, it leads you down the rabbit hole.
So I started off on a Raspberry Pi, playing around with various scripts, and like that kettle thing was a servo hooked up to a Raspberry Pi. And at the time, I remember using a piece of software called Siri Proxy,
Okay,
and this is when you still had to pay for SSL certificates.
okay,
Like, it was a while back, so the internet was just slightly less secure. We were still telling people to look for the padlock in their browser before entering their card details, sort of thing. And yeah, Siri Proxy would intercept the voice assistant on an iPod. I made that iPod Touch last. I like to make my tech last. So it would intercept the voice assistant on the iPod Touch, and would allow me to do things on the Raspberry Pi.
okay.
So I started off, send a command and it would actuate the servo. And thought, how can I get a nicer looking UI? Hang on a minute, I know how to write software. And rule number one of writing software is have a look if anyone else has written it first. So I did. Came across Home Assistant, and I think when I was just discovering it, it was when Bro Automation was, yeah, remember him,
yeah,
Ben. Always had a fantastic hairstyle, that fella.
yeah.
Uh, for those who aren't aware, Ben from Bro Automation is bald, and would always make that joke.
And disappear. It's just a shame because Ben's videos were fantastic, and he just suddenly
Brilliant.
stopped. And then I think I remember he posted a video saying, "I'm back, I'm coming back," and then he never came back.
Yeah,
and then he
just
disappeared again.
disappeared off the face of
Bro
the earth.
Automation that was one of my. I was hooked on that. For me, the beginning was Bro Automation and Frank from Home Assistant, his live Twitch streams. That was my my go to.
And I don't know if you remember the Bro Automation multi-sensor.
Yeah.
So he put together a build guide, and this has sort of inspired some of our future plans, which I'll talk about a bit later. But he put together a multi-sensor guide, and then designed a 3D printed case, and it had like a PIR sensor, a DHT22, crikey, and when everyone was using them, a few other bits and bobs, all packaged into one 3D printed case. And then this was before ESP Home became mainstream.
Okay.
So he then wrote all the Arduino software onto a Node MCU, would connect to MQTT, and then this was also before auto discovery became sort of commonplace. I've been running Home Assistant since 0.37. It's been a while.
I don't know what my first version was. It was painful. I mean, obviously, it was just before Lovelace. It was just purely YAML, and I've got no kind of programming background. So for me, it was literally Google and see what other people had done, taking their code and just playing with it.
Yeah,
but it was I say painful. It was painfully fun. I did it because it was a good
absolutely.
Yeah.
If it's not fun, you just wouldn't carry on. You know. So yeah, that's. I mean, looking back, it seems both ages ago, and Home Assistant's just reached 10 years old, and it's weird to think. Actually, no, I've been tinkering with this stuff probably for 7 or 8 of those.
Yeah.
Um, it's bonkers
Yeah.
to reflect on.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel right because there's also an element of crikey, I've wasted 8 years on this.
Well, you could say that, but actually, people like myself have wasted it. Given it's not led to anything. I suppose it's led to the podcast. For you, it led to Local Bytes.
True.
So yeah, and
Um,
I'll go back to that then. So you had Hue, Home Assistant. You kind of come up with those automations. You flashed a few Tasmota pieces. How does that lead to a company?
I got bored. So I mentioned that we closed the company with essentially 2 years worth of salary,
Yep.
which I'm still immensely proud of.
Yep.
It was only done that way because we weren't paying ourselves much.
Yeah.
Like I worked 18 months working long days for the equivalent of minimum wage.
Yeah.
But it didn't matter. We owned the company.
Yep.
Who cares?
Yeah.
You know. So then I was burnt out. I really was burnt out. I was getting miserable. I was struggling, so I took time out.
Yep.
I probably just slept for a month, and then I got bored, and I was like, you know what, I don't want to go back to work yet.
Okay.
Part of me is really enjoying not having a boss.
Yep.
So I thought, why don't I just make things a little easier for the community?
Okay.
At this point, I had started listening to the self-hosted podcast. They've been going for 2 years now, two and a half years, something like that. They've just hit a milestone. So congrats if anyone from Alex or Chris, if you're listening to this. Yeah, so I was listening to them, and there was a company called Cloud Free that just started up in America.
Okay.
Someone very similar situation. Think he was in university. Just wanted more Tasmota devices. So I thought, you know what, the UK often gets missed out on things. Everything seems to launch in America first. So there's a problem. Let's fix it. You know, I don't like to blame other people for something that I can fix. You know, for something I can solve. I don't like to moan too much about, you know, where I am, my community, like anything like that, because at the end of the day, I as an individual can change that.
Yep.
If I don't like the way that the street I live on looks, for instance, well, I can start taking pride in my garden. I don't actually have a garden where I'm living currently, but thinking back to when I was living with my parents, like we just take pride in our stuff, and we'd, you know, offer to help out the neighbours and start being that positive impact. And ultimately, I lived on a street that won our village, our town sort of competitions. You know, the In Bloom, Britain in Bloom sort of competition thing, multiple years running, because at the end of the day, we fostered a community. And I think that's what all of this is about. It's about community. At the end of the day, I was annoyed, and if I'm annoyed, someone else is probably annoyed. So I'm going to change that. I may as well, rather than just being miserable at it. I may as well be miserable and make a little bit of money. So yeah, that's how it all kicked off. COVID was happening.
So I was going to say, and that's always the key for a lot of things in recent times is COVID. People have got spare time. I'm going to kind of get my hands dirty with something.
Yeah, COVID has a massive impact on the web development business, mainly from a morale perspective. I spent a year cooped up with my mother. She's unfortunately immunocompromised to an extent, so we had to be really careful. Not she didn't have no immune system or anything. She's just heavily asthmatic. Been hospitalised with flu. if she got COVID during, the first wave, probably would have lost her. And I wouldn't have wanted that. So,
No, I think it goes with this scene.
so we isolated.
Okay.
We got our weekly care package from the government
Yep.
with our kilogram of rice and Frey Bentos pies.
Yep.
Went a bit stir crazy, and that had an effect on the business. But then, so we were out of one lockdown. My mate and I, we weren't doing great, so we closed that business.
Okay.
I slept for a month. I then went to the doctor and was like, I probably shouldn't be sleeping this much. They did some tests. Turns out I was massively vitamin D deficient. Like massively. So they put me on a really high dose. And lo and behold, when you have enough vitamin D, you can actually wake up. So yeah, got a bit bored. Because of the pandemic, there are a bunch of government schemes going on to help businesses. So there was the government-backed startup loans.
Yep.
So I took a bit of a loan out. I didn't have to, but I didn't want to burn through savings.
Yep.
So the business 75% was funded by a loan. 25 was funded by myself. I spent a month on Alibaba, eventually found a factory who would work with us on this project. And then they shipped us 1,000 plugs.
Wow.
Pre-flashed with Tasmosa. Crikey. It was a custom build of Tasmosa.
Yeah.
I wrote my own calibration code.
So I was going to say that. So when you're kind of speaking to this vendor who does this piece for you, I'm assuming you're sending them all the schematics, whatever any blueprints, etc.
So
they then do it and send the devices out.
With the plugs, they sort of white label to your plugs for anyone who wants their logo on a plug.
Okay.
But unlike a lot of the vendors, instead of getting sort of ESP modules from Tuya, they would source them from Expressive.
Okay.
Because they're cheaper, and then they would flash them in-house. So in this case, they actually sent me schematics. And from that, I put together a Tasmosa template. And then you can actually compile Tasmosa and bake a template in that way. So that's what we did. We compiled a copy of Tasmosa. The only changes we made were the template and some calibration code. Now, I refer you back to rule 1 of programming, which I did not follow this time. And rule 1 is, of course, check if someone else has done the thing you're trying to do first. Because it turns out the Tasmosa devs have a paid driver. And this is what we did for the further batches.
Yeah.
I paid them a couple £100, and they sent me a file, and it worked perfectly. Mine, on the other hand, did not. So the first ever batch
of 1,000.
Of 1,000, the first ever batch of 1,000, I had to manually recalibrate.
Oh.
But being a tech enthusiast, I made my life easier. So there's probably a photo somewhere buried in the archives. What I did, I had an extension lead, and then I got 2 of my plugs, right? Because the way you reset Tasmosa is by turning them off and on again 6 times. And I knew that if I reset them, it would calibrate correctly. That's not quite true. I knew if I reset them, I could go in and manually trigger a calibration. So I wrote a piece of software that would toggle a plug on and off, and then wait for a Wi-Fi network to appear.
Yeah.
then connect to that Wi-Fi network, and then interact with the Tasmotor API to run the calibration commands.
Wow. Okay. So a nice automation there for
Yeah.
recalibrating devices. Okay.
Then, because the process is limited by its serial parts, I slightly modified the thing so that I could be calibrating one whilst resetting the other. So I spent probably 15 hours
Ooh.
continuously. I and this is maybe a regret I have with the business. I've put the business before family in times when I shouldn't have.
Yep.
So I missed one of my nan's big birthdays, and they threw a bit of a shindig, bit of a party. This is my nan who lives on a farm. It's not a working farm anymore. It kind of is. They rent out the fields, but they don't keep their own livestock.
Yep.
But they've got a big ass barn, so they had a party in it. And I didn't go to that, and I'm still a bit frustrated at myself.
Because of this calibration exercise, or because you're just spending a lot of time just setting up local bytes?
Because of the calibration exercise,
Okay.
or at least because I prioritized getting the plugs to people than being like, no, it's going to take another week.
Yep.
So yeah, I watched a lot of Always Sunny in Philadelphia that night. And it was very repetitive. I just have like a box, my two plugs, and another box. So I'd empty one out, and plug, go, plug, wait for it. Okay, move a lamp. I think I was calibrating off at the time onto the other plug, unplug. It was. I had a bit of a system going, but it was mind numbing.
I can imagine.
And the worst part, I say the worst part, is it only worked like 80% of the time.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, we didn't do great in the beginning.
So the question is, you got to the end. Did you recalibrate the 1,000? Did you sell that 1,000? And once you sold that 1,000, was that kind of right? Okay, we've sold the first batch. There's a business model here we can make money out of.
Yeah, so we sold because also I was completely naive. I assumed everything was just going to work. Never works first time. And the factory had sort of they ran out of cartons for 100 units. So they're like, oh, can we send them in boxes of 150? I was like, sure, crack on.
Yeah.
Sure, it won't make a difference to me. Oh, how wrong I was. So I've mentioned to you, but I don't think I've mentioned to many people, but I don't handle the fulfillment myself.
Okay.
There is a note on our contact page, actually. At the end of the day, I don't want to be bogged down to a physical location, and I got to be pragmatic about it, right?
Yeah.
The more time I spend actually fulfilling stuff, the less time I can spend on creating new things, doing things that actually matter. Not saying fulfillment doesn't matter, but it doesn't matter to me.
Yeah.
So, yeah, this was at a time where the warehouse I was working with really struggles to take boxes of different sizes. So that first batch, and because there are a few failures, in the end, I sent 900 of the original 1,000 to the warehouse. We sold out most of them. And that's when one of the Tasmotor devs reached out to me, because I was talking in their Discord being like, I'm trying to do this thing. Weirdness is happening. Anyone got any suggestions? And one of them was reached out and was like, oh, we've got a thing to do this, right? And it's all well documented as well. They gave me a PDF and I can just give that to the factory, and they were like, oh yeah, this is brilliant. We can work with that. Yeah. Fool I was.
So from a business point of view, when you kind of think your Alibaba person to do the plugs. That's at the same point in time. Had you secured the fulfillment? This fascinates me how this all works. People talk about Shopify and all that. It fascinates me.
Yeah. So
you managed to get Alibaba to send to the warehouse to do the packaging to then do the fulfillment. Is that how it works?
Yeah, first batch was a bit different. First
Okay.
batch, and I will mention because the way international works, we had to handle a lot of the moving parts,
Okay.
especially in the beginning. So it's heavily recommended to have your own accounts with different freight companies, for instance. So we started off with FedEx, and we had to handle, getting the rates we needed so that we could ship goods over. So first batch came to my house. My mother was not pleased. Oh well. First batch came to my house, and I did the calibration exercise in front of the TV. But then, yeah, the way I found the warehouse, and this sort of goes forward with probably the way that I've run the business. I see myself existing within a network, right?
Okay.
I have a community of people that I talk to, and they have a community of people that they talk to, so on and so forth. We have this massive web, and I'm sure Zuckerberg will tell us there's only like 6 connections we need to make to get to everyone in the world, or some rubbish like that. When we're talking genuine connections, it's way more than 6. That's by the by. And I just started 3D printing as well.
Okay.
I was interested in 3D printing, so I bought a 3D printer. And me noticing things, I received this parcel, looked on the label, and thought that address is different to the person I bought the thing from.
Yeah.
And that's when I sort of discovered the warehouse company. I did not do enough research. I should have done more. I should have weighed up my options. But ultimately, I dropped them an email, and they were like, "Oh yeah, we're really popular with small businesses. Let's hop on a call." Everyone wants a call with business. Hate it. So had a chat with them, and at the end of the day, our current process, we supply a .bin file to the factory. They flash it onto plugs. They laser print our logo on. It's either laser or screen print. I can't remember with the plugs. They then box it all up. Then I've got an account with DHL. Really nice representative at DHL who's really good at getting me to spend money with them. So we then arrange shipping. DHL will go to the factory, pick up 10 cartons or whatever, ship them over via plane to South Wales, where the warehouse is.
Okay.
We let the warehouse know it's coming, so they're not surprised.
Yep.
They put it on their shelves, and then their system pulls orders in from Shopify. So we run the website off Shopify, and I'll talk a tiny bit more about that in a moment. But yeah, so they pull all the orders through from Shopify. They dispatch them out with used to just be Royal Mail. We also now ship with DHL.
Okay.
No, we don't. We ship with DPD. Always get the two mixed up because they're just letters. I'm actually dyslexic. Surprises a lot of people, but I really struggle with letters sometimes, which is why I think it's why I like programming, because everything is color coded. And that's why I'm probably good at it. It's all muscle memory and just colors at the end of the day. So yeah, they then send it out to customers, and it means I don't have to babysit the process. I can go on holiday. Christmas, I don't have to do anything special. I just have to keep sane and keep customers up to date as to what's happening. Because I know last year we had massive strikes across the Royal Mail network, and that was hard. But yeah, that's sort of how we started off. To this day, it's still the same process.
Okay.
So
you've expanded the product range, so
expanded products,
plugs to bulbs.
Plugs and bulbs are ours. I had a chat with Sonoff, so we now stock quite a bit of their stuff. All of that is Zigbee. Nothing that we sell connects directly to the internet.
Yep.
And it will always be that way.
Okay, good.
At the end of the day, we are here to disconnect you from the cloud. We are
Yep.
not going to try and sell you something that connects to the cloud.
Yep.
Even if it's really nice and I like the look of it, tough. It ain't happening. But yeah, the process is still exactly the same. I mean, we've
Okay.
just done our Christmas order, which has come to just under half a ton of stock, half a metric ton.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So we
That's a fair
used to
chunk.
have batch sizes of 1,000 plugs. We've
Yep.
just done an order of 3,000 TAS motor plugs, 2,000 ESP home plugs, and 1,000 bulbs. And
Fantastic.
it's come to about 500 kilograms of
And
goods.
shipping international.
Yep. All coming from China
Yep.
into South Wales. The poor warehouse, they're not going to know what's hit them. But that's going to be like 50 boxes.
Yeah.
And they're not small boxes, 10
Yeah.
kilograms each.
Wow.
So we've scaled up our operations, to say the least. But we've made mistakes along the
Yep.
way. Our first batch, we lost money. We lost quite a bit.
Yep.
But every business has its
Of
struggles,
course.
and at the end of the day, it's not our struggles that define us. It's how we deal with them. It's how we prevent those struggles from happening again.
Yeah, that's one of the questions I was going to ask in terms of. It's a fair point. Any new business is going to have setbacks and obstacles
Yeah,
as you learn about it, etc. With the setback of batch one and understanding how it went, did you just do things differently, or did you say, listen, we didn't do it right 100%, but actually the concept was right. We'll try it again, but we'll tinker with
yeah.
it slightly.
The concept worked, right?
Yep.
People loved it.
Yep.
It was a slow burn in the beginning,
Yep.
but as we got the word out, people were like, "No, this is really helpful," and especially as To Your Convert was working less and less.
Yep.
Our business just got better that way. But with every sort of new step I take with the business, I've always got to think, and this is going to sound awful at first, but how can I be lazy about this? Because again, working with tech, and coming from the software background, I'm used to working at scale.
Yep.
I'm used to building things and then taking a look at our various analytics, both our customer facing stuff and then telemetry data, that sort of thing, and looking at those pain points from a system perspective and then improving them. That's the whole software development lifecycle for you
Yep.
in an awful nutshell. Someone beeped.
I had to be there.
Oh yeah, that came through. So at the end of the day, you've just got to take a step back and
Yep.
think what went wrong.
Yeah.
And it's never a blame exercise. You know, I've never gone through one of these processes thinking I failed. There have been times I've thought I dropped the ball. There are times I've thought, I did a really bad job at this, but that's okay. Ultimately, if we don't have those moments where we can't introspect, we can't improve.
Of course. Of course.
So yeah, batch one was painful and it was physically painful. My wrists hurt, my back hurt, my legs hurt, everything hurt, my head hurt. There's probably a picture somewhere of me just asleep on the sofa surrounded by plugs. I was having nightmares about the things. But it made us a lot more cautious about
Yep.
batch two.
And you went from it.
Yeah, we had a much more thorough testing process. We rushed less. We were honest with our customers. We were like, look, it's going to take a bit longer because we need to do it right.
Yeah.
And that's when we, I started taking things seriously. So we went up to a 13 amp relay. So we started off on 10 amp. We were doing 10 amp, essentially uncalibrated, poorly calibrated. for £9, which is how we lost money.
Yeah.
But yeah, we went up to 13 amp, raised the price a bit, and then we just spent another week or so back and forth with the factory,
Yep.
being like, look, we need to get it right this time.
Yeah.
And yeah, it seems to be working. We launched bulbs without us having to touch product, so that was successful. And then we're going through the process again with power strip. I guess the whole thing has just taught both me, but I guess anyone I talk to, anyone else I involve, it's taught us about the pitfalls that you can very easily find yourself in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it was hell. It was awful.
But you made it at the end.
Somehow.
Good. So
Still here.
So became it's now your full-time shindig. What is what's the next, what's the plan for the next 12 months for Local Bytes? What's the next year?
So funny story. My lawyers have told me to stop talking about the thing I really want to talk about. I had a meeting yesterday. So now it's my full-time thing. I've kind of got to protect it, right? So we're looking at trademarks for all our graphics, for our name, that sort of thing. And I was talking to them about Super Secret Project, which I know
which I feel really privileged to know about. So thank you.
Yeah, it's the worst kept secret ever. And they were like, "Oh, have you announced it yet?" And I was like, "No, not yet." And then I was like, "Actually, well, funny you should ask." And they have strongly advised me not to tell anyone else.
So what we'll say then is something exciting is coming down the line. From
really exciting.
Really exciting.
It's what I can say is it's exciting enough that we may be looking to apply for a patent.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm not allowed to talk about it. Because if I talk about it too much, then we can't get those right.
So that's fine.
Super Secret Project.
Super Secret Project is coming.
Really exciting.
What's your time frames for this big
we are. So I'm working on some bleep, and then I've got bleep. And then it's going out to some testers. So I've involved some community members, but I have not announced it yet. We're hoping to do a launch video towards the end of January, early February. Depending on how testing goes. I've also got to rework some of the CAD. So that I've got a mate who does engineering as a day job. A lot of this business, I've just surrounded myself with people who can do stuff better than me.
Listen, that's the best people to surround yourself with.
Yeah. So the guy who's going to redo the CAD, good mate of mine. My accountant, I knew her as a good friend before she was my accountant. My project manager, I've brought project manager on now. Game changer. I don't manage things well. So I have a PM. She manages me. She manages the factories to an extent. So with Power Strip, key example, I had a half an hour chat with her about the sort of stuff I'm trying to achieve. She turned that chat into an actual brief.
Wow.
With things that I would have thought were obvious, but in hindsight, if you're not an absolute nerd about it, it really isn't obvious.
Yeah.
You know, most factories don't care what chipset it uses. At the end of the day, most factories are just getting chips from Tuya and they're flashing it. So with Power Strip, we've actually set up a collaboration between two factories.
So
the people who do our plugs are going to be pre-flashing a bunch of modules with Tasmota and with ESP Home. And then they'll be shipping them over to the other factory, who will then bake them onto the PCB for power strip, and then do all the etching and printing off boxes,
Fantastic.
packaging, all that.
Yeah.
So we are. I sent out some new firmware to them yesterday, so we're hoping to get samples over this week, maybe next week. Power strip. That, I mean, it's not going to be power monitoring, or at least the basic version. Foreshadowing. And yeah, so the basic version isn't going to be power monitoring. It's just going to have 4 relays, 5 if you count the USB.
Yep.
But it's going to be cheaper than 4 plugs. So
Yeah.
A lot of people just use our plugs for switching. A lot of people just use our plugs for power monitoring. So that's in the pipeline. Aiming for early next year. I was hoping to get them by end of year. We may have them commissioned by end of year, but delivery in January. Power strips. We're working with our plug factory. Now we've found a factory who we're a really good relationship with them, because you just got to cultivate those relationships at the end of the day. So they are helping us out with power strips again early next year. They'll be pre-flashed with WLED.
Good.
Because I just don't think Tasmota makes as much sense with them.
Yeah.
And then I think that's all I can talk about at the moment.
Good.
I hate that I can't talk about
exciting
things.
Stuff though. Exciting.
It's really exciting. And then so that's all the product side. We're also reworking all our documentation. So you've seen we recently released a installation guide for Home Assistant. So that was on a Pi 4. Now that the shortage is alleviated, let's call it that. It's not quite over yet, but so that was on a Pi 4. And we've filmed a guide for Tasmota, filmed a guide for ESP Home. We are reworking our documentation for Tasmota, and we are writing new documentation for ESP Home. And then after that, I think we're going to be doing a sort of comparison between ESP Home and Tasmota. That'll be accompanied by a blog post. So ideally, I want to be all our important documentation. I want to have backed up in video form as well.
Okay. Wow.
Because everyone learns differently. But it's really easy at the moment. We've got 2 main pieces of documentation. So, and then when I eventually get around to moving out of this flat, I'll be able to go a bit heavier on the video side. At the end of the day, we're still very much a product company. I'm not going to even try and do any sort of upload schedule or anything like that. But I think if we're putting together guides for different things, it makes sense to put together a video as well. Like the 3 videos that we're working on now, they're all filmed within the space of about 2 hours. So I just set up cameras, hit record, did my piece, did an install, stop the cameras, make a cuppa, come back, turn everything back on, do Tasmota install, stop cameras, cup of tea. This company is fueled by tea, honestly. So we've got a lot in the pipeline, but we're sticking to our roots. I'm trying to balance the new stuff with taking care of our customers. We're working on process there. So because Christmas is just around the corner, we're working on automating our order cancellation and update processes. Because sometimes people will order something and then immediately email us being like, oh, I forgot to add this to my basket. Or they'll email us and be like, oh, I thought this was Zigbee, can you cancel? Now, at the end of the day, it's just me watching those emails. And because we're using third-party fulfillment, it's very possible that I don't see it soon enough to cancel the fulfillment. And then we have to be like, really sorry, it's already gone out. If you want, write return to sender, post it, we'll get it back and refund you. So we're working on making that process a lot kinder to people, because at the end of the day, we want people to have a good experience. And I think I said in my sort of welcome to Local Bytes video, at the end of the day, I want to be running a company that I can wholeheartedly recommend to my family.
Yeah.
Because I think if I don't, I would be ashamed of myself. And I think the community would be ashamed of me. And I just don't want to do that.
It's quite strong, ashamed.
Yeah, it's true though. It's true. We've all seen. I think was it Philips Hue? Mike Hugh. That's the big one at the moment as well. They've just severed the link for local control, and there's outrage. Mazda sending a cease and desist to it was either a CND or a DM something DMCA, either a cease and desist or a DMCA for a library that connected to my Mazda, and we as a community we see that, we see that and we think, what, you don't care about us.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, not only am I running a business, I am a member of that community.
Yeah.
I'm looking out for me. I'm doing the things that I would want a company to do.
Yeah.
That's how I run things at the end of the day.
Good way to keep yourself on your toes then. Good.
Absolutely.
Right, Adam, before we wrap up, because that's been a fast hour, we're fast approaching.
Yeah, it's
questions from the community.
It flies by.
Yeah, a couple of questions from the community, and we'll keep them brief because they were good questions, but I think we could be here all day going into the rabbit hole answering them, given the way they're structured. So one came from James Sherlock on Twitter. With so many standards, tools, and options to go with, how do you choose the best smart home product for your home, assuming no existing foundation?
So, first off, thank you, James, for that question. I won't tell the audience that you're a good friend of mine.
You can pay him later.
Yeah, he has a habit of just replying to my tweets, and then I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot you. You followed me. No, James, good mates. He keeps me on my toes a lot. So you dick. You're going to edit this, right? Yeah, that's a really good question. Because I kind of see this as a two sides of things. One is as a business when it comes to how we're stocking, but I'll park that until the next question.
Okay.
As a consumer, I think is one good way to approach this. How do you choose the best? And the key thing to think about here is how to define the term best. And that's the sort of the linchpin of this question. Best is very dependent on what you have, what you're willing to get, and how far you want to go with things. So if you live in a tiny flat, a bed sit, you have one bulb, one light fixture, you have maybe a couple appliances, a bedside lamp. Best is going to look very different to if you live in a 3-bed, if you live in a completely detached home. So it's really difficult. Personally, I tend to go towards Zigbee, which may surprise a lot of people given that I've built a company on Wi-Fi. But at the end of the day, Zigbee is really good for devices that you want to set them up, you want them to stay in their lane and just do their one purpose.
Yeah.
Right, really good for that. So I've got door sensors on Zigbee. So I've got one downstairs. I live in a 1-bed flat. So when I open my front door, my landing light comes on to illuminate the stairs, that sort of thing. So all my sensors are Zigbee. Means I don't have to faff with wiring, because that could be a restriction. Is for me, I can't really route a cable anywhere. When it comes to things like plugs, quite often I may want to do more advanced things. We've got, power monitoring. Well, some appliances I care more about, so I may increase the frequency or use power delta. So that's sort of when I go into Wi-Fi.
Okay.
If I was a consumer just with nothing and I had a lot of space, I would go for Zigbee for most of my stuff. But that's how I approach it.
Yep.
But yeah, great there. Jesus, my words. Great question, James.
Thanks, James. And make sure he takes you for a pint for that question. Next question. I'm going to ask the first question. Do you know Ken Guest by any chance?
Only so I knew him on Twitter before I actually spoke to him.
Okay.
Turns out he's. I hope you won't mind me saying this. He is also part of the PHP Framework Integration Group, which I'm a member of. Okay. So they are an organization, a collective of projects that put together standards for web development.
Okay. Good.
But yeah, I don't personally know him. I don't actually talk to him day to day.
Fine. So I'll let you off the hook with this one then. So Ken has asked the question: how do you decide what to sell, what to stock, and do you take any suggestions?
There's a short answer and a slightly longer answer. The short answer is how do we decide? Not very well. And do we take suggestions? Yes, we absolutely do.
Okay.
A lot of what we're doing is suggestion oriented at the moment. So
Okay.
power strip, for instance, heavily requested. Bulbs, heavily requested. Plugs, scratching my own itch.
Yeah. So if someone was to request it, how do they reach you? What is there a standard email address they can reach out?
Yes. So what we typically recommend for suggestions, social media. So most people will sort of tweet us, send us a tweet, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
The reason I say that is then from a business perspective, we can also gauge how other people feel about that suggestion.
Yep.
We do have people email us. Sometimes there'll be a support request, and then at the end of that, have you thought about doing this? At the end of the day, I read every non-spam email that comes into the inbox. To be honest, I probably read all the spam as well, just to make sure. But yeah, either email or social media will get through to me. When it comes to actually looking at that, quite often we will sort of go onto Alibaba and see what is available from a white label perspective.
Yep.
And then think about whether that actually answers the needs of our community. So power strip, quite a clear one. Bulbs surprised me. And I mentioned earlier, when you're working in business, you've got to think about things from two perspectives. You've got to think about what I want as my own customer, but then what the business needs. Now, bulbs, I've never needed a Wi-Fi bulb. I've never had one. A lot of people started on LifeX instead of Hue. LifeX is fantastic if you've got, a small space. And I guess having a community allows me to challenge those perspectives. So whilst I personally haven't had the need for Wi-Fi bulbs, because my bulbs are all Zigbee,
yep.
A lot of them are the IKEA ones. Fine, they work pretty well, good price point. I always thought, well, I can't add any value there. I can't be a positive impact. Last thing I want to do is just shill stuff for the sake of shilling it.
Yep.
I want people to buy things that actually make sense.
Yep.
But the community proved me otherwise. We had a lot of people saying, actually, no, we'd love to see bulbs.
Okay, good.
Maybe they're in an environment where they've invested a bunch of money in their Wi-Fi. Got Unify access points in every house. To them, it makes zero sense to start up a Zigbee network.
Yep.
And that was quite an interesting perspective shift for me personally. So yeah, we absolutely take suggestions, keep them rolling in.
Good.
Try and tweet us. Otherwise, my inbox is just going to be flooded. And
what's your Twitter handle then? Do people know?
It's at Local Bytes Shop. We're on Twitter. We're on Facebook, although I'm awful at Facebook. We're technically on Instagram. So I think every now and then I'll put a post up. There's probably one of me in a coffee shop and one of me with a dog. It's those sort of things. But yeah, the main one's Twitter. We are also on Mastodon. I need to get better at that. So I think we're on. Actually, I know where I can find it. Local Bytes socials. We have a page on the website for where all our socials are. So at any point, if you think, hang on a minute, is that actually them? Head on over to mylocalbytes.com/socials, and there's links to our Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and our Mastodon. I need to put YouTube on
/socials.
I need to update that page. Like I said, we're doing a lot of updates at the moment.
Good.
And then, yeah, YouTube is a new one. So feel free to comment on our videos if you'd like to see something. But no, the best one's Twitter. I'm fairly active there, just personally as well.
Yep. Good.
So, yeah, that's how to reach me. And then would we ever sell plugs and sockets that aren't Type G UK? Again, this comes down to what I feel I can actually provide.
Okay.
So there's a big element of if I exist in the UK and Europe, what value do I give selling to the US and Australia, for instance?
Yep.
There are places that you can buy any standard of TAS motor plug internationally from various Chinese companies. So what can I actually give to those markets? At some point, we may expand our presence. Pardon me. We may expand our presence. So we did this with Europe. We have a warehouse in Europe, and the value for customers there is faster shipping. You know, people can buy from us, and it's going to take half the time it takes from an international site, something like that. It also means, as a consumer, you get all of your statutory rights buying from a company that exists in that country. So, like in the UK, I believe by law we've got 6 months warranty.
Yep.
And to be fair, even in the UK, if a fault can be proven to be from a manufacturing defect, that can extend out to up to 6 years, I believe.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, we've got fairly decent consumer rights in that regard. But I mean, as that time gets longer, it becomes harder to prove. So at the end of the day, that is a protection you get by buying from a UK company.
Of course.
You won't get that if you're buying internationally.
Yep.
So that's where the value is, and also good looking customer service. I'm so sorry. Absolutely hate myself for that. So yeah, if we can actually provide value to a region, we will absolutely do it. So new products we'll be bringing out in the UK and Europe at the same time, and then if there's a market that people want to see, again, tweet us. If there's a market where we have your plug type, but we don't ship there, tweet us. We can ship internationally. It just takes a little bit of me checking to see how much it costs us so that we can, price it accordingly.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, we are going to move in whatever direction the rest of the community wants us to move.
Yeah. Good.
Because that's who I'm here for at the end of the day.
Good. Adam, been an absolute pleasure. So just to recap, mylocalbytes.com, and if you want to understand where their socials are, mylocalbytes.com/socials. Socials. There you go. Adam, thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure, Lee. Thanks for having me on. This has been a fantastic time to talk.
Good, and I'm looking forward to this secret project being released.
I'll send you some updated pictures. Just don't tell anyone.
Super. Brilliant. Thanks, Adam. Cheers then.
Thanks for having me.
Bye-bye.